Dependency injection is a new name for an old concept that makes code easier to reuse. .NET uses host application builder inside program.cs files for web services and Blazor apps to make using DI easier. Console applications can also make the adaptation, which I covered in the configuration video. Dependency injection can be used at any point in an application, and when you start getting the DI mindset, you will want to do everything in DI. However, there could be a lot more work to use dependency injection, so think before you walk, or you could be walking down the wrong path. The best way to understand how DI works is to look at a normal object like the worker object here, and inside of it we instantiated another object. And that's how it works. But now worker is dependent on an instantiated object. And if there were any changes to that instantiated object, you would have to retest all of worker. Usually the first step to people get into dependency injection is now you're going to take the class that was instantiated in the worker and you're going to instantiate it outside of the worker and pass it into a parameter of the class. I know that sounds kind of a little strange right now, but that's what happens. And most people are done at that point. However, there is the second part where people start having problems, and that's when you inherit from that original class to a child, and you've added a method in that child class, and then when that instantiated child object gets sent into the worker, you're using that method now. Now you've got a problem because when you inherit from that again, you might add another method. Next thing you know, this worker class that you're sending object into is got a bunch of if-then else statements in it. 90% of the developers in the world, when you talk about dependency injection, this is exactly what they think about. They think that you have one or more objects, and this even happens with a single object, and they will create an interface, which is a contract, to a method in the worker class. Then when you send in that instantiated object, it just gets run as the instantiated object. A lot of developers are doing this if they only have one object. To me, this is the same thing as saying I need to create a Word template for every Word document I create. I'm going to say this a lot, is that sometimes dependency injection will cause you extra work when you don't really need it. So as I was sitting there thinking about how can I put examples together about dependency injection that are not going to be a minute and a half long or 2 minutes long, and I came across a thought about there's dependency injection. Everybody uses this every day, even if you don't think you do. But there's good decisions in programming and there's bad decisions in programming. And I think this might help out a lot with talking about dependency injection. What I did is I basically wrote two different applications, started them out. They're going to use entirely the same backend, but there's one file called worker that's going to be different. And just based on the first developer who came in and did one small thing could make decisions after that point, either good or bad. And let's just see how this works out. In this video, I'm going to show you two applications. The one over here on the right, I'm going to call application 1, is a typical application that is found out in the wild, that was designed and written by someone who thinks a developer's knowledge and expertise is measured by them getting an application to work, which is partially true, but it also has to be maintained. Application number 2 is an application that is found in a well-structured company that was designed by a centralized group or architect or a person that knows what they're doing, and they know that a developer's knowledge is based on how well their teammates can edit their code, or just other people in general. Both applications will perform an export of data to a CSV file, both applications will find a need to export JSON and XML as well as their original CSV. I hope when this exercise is completed, you will understand dependency injection and how it works. If we look at application 1, and I'm not really worried about the using statements, versus application 2, application 1 has everything put into one file. So let me kind of give you the background of this. They both are going to have to load their customers. All right, there's no getting around that. And they're both going to be calling execute to do an export. The difference between these is the person who put together this file decided to put the load and the export method right inside of the worker application, which this is a pretty big method. And that brings this file up to about 136 lines versus 27. Right off the bat, when you're looking at this, if you were coming in to edit this file and someone said, hey, I need you to update this export, the first thing that I would be thinking is, one, we didn't use, or whoever designed this did not use separation of concerns, because the loading and exporting of data should not be in the main application. Imagine this application is like a user interface, and you're just starting into the user interface. And this was a button to export your customers. This is cleaner because you've got customers in a different area. Yeah, you're using dependency injection, where they're both using dependency injection right off the bat. So the worker is pulling in folder config, and then it's using it locally. This guy is the number 2 app is using dependency injection. It's setting it locally, which it really doesn't need to do. We could probably get rid of this and get rid of this. And it's just pushing it to the fileStorage CSV. Okay, so let's see how we, get down into this a little bit. The launcher for both of these looks exactly the same. The program looks the same. They're both calling worker, they're both calling execute. Everything is set up identical. So we don't really need to deal with that. The worker is someplace we're going to have to do a lot of work in. If you look at the one on the right, we have a fileStorage CSV file, and we don't have that over here on the left because everything's in the same file. Which I'm just going to relax this down here, crunch this down with Control M-O. So we need an export, and this guy here has got this export, but we need one for JSON, and we need one for XML, which means that you're going to need serialization, and they're both going to need this. So I'm going to bring a serialization class into each side of this. So we're going to add an existing project because we use these things here all the time. So here's serialization, like that. We're going to need one over here. Add existing project. Clicked on the wrong one. There we go. So now they both have serialization. Both of them have this serialization JSON and serialization XML. All right, so we're still pretty much even at the moment. This one here still looks like it's a lot harder to understand. It's not that it is. I understand that. The file structures are better in the one on the right side. Hey, if you think there's too much information to remember, then like and subscribe to the channel. Then you'll have a URL that you can go back and look at anytime. The one on the left here, when people go to edit this, typically people do not want to make a lot of changes in the code. So someone will probably end up changing this to export CSV, and then just coming in and dropping in, 2 more guys here, 2 more methods, and calling this one here JSON and XML, and put something here that determines whether or not you're going to choose CSV, JSON, or XML. And this is legitimate. All right? There's nothing wrong with doing it this way. However, it's not clean. And that's not my opinion. That's just a fact. It's not clean. You're not opening yourself up for the next thing when someone says, hey, you guys just did an export on JSON and XML, right? And you go, yeah. And they say, can we get that DLL so we can also export JSON and XML? Now what happened? Now you've got more work to do here. So if we take this and we get rid of that, and then we change this to just export again. So now what we're going to do is, since we've already got the serialization one in, we're going to bring in the export DLL, because that's the one that these people are asking for. Now I'm just going to talk about the one here on the right hand side, the number one person, that a lot of this could have been avoided if they didn't do this. If they didn't do the execute and the load export, and it would have put this in another file, this would have been a lot quicker process. And you probably wouldn't have had someone come in and put the export CS and JSON and all that other stuff. So we're going to just get rid of this guy like really quick, just like that. And we've got the export out here, and let's take the CSV, and I've got it inheriting from fileStorage right now, which has all of the generic stuff that was there in fileStorage CSV. But since we're doing a JSON and an XML, I want to make sure that this export will be there. Okay, so we put it in the base of fileStorage here, and we made the export abstract. That requires it to be there. All right, so now we have that in mind. We could come in and we could grab this fileStorage CSV, and the reason I'm going down this path is because I want to make sure that this is not broken before we move on. So here's the new CSV fileStore I folder config, and we need to bring that in with the add a project reference to it like that. Now we get the using statement like that. And at this point in time, the fileStorage CSV, just like the other one, we would be pulling this through like this and like that. But just like this one on the side over here, how we don't need these two things. These are just kind of worthless now. So we can just get rid of them. Neither one of these are needed. And that would work out pretty good. And these are getting just almost instantaneously, these things both became pretty workable now. We don't need this here. But they do pretty much the same thing. The only difference is I've got this fileStorage CSV being sent in. And say we did that over here. Say we took this, put this here, picked that up, and dropped it in. And now they're the same. And this guy, we can get off of here like that. And these guys are the same application, looking pretty similar. And this is just the quickest thing was just to go in and get that fileStorage CSV out of Worker. Now Worker's manageable. If this was an application, yeah, I could put any kind of file CSV or file storage in here that I wanted. In fact, let's do that. Back on the file number one, if we go in and we put in new folder config, and we got to put it in, and oops, put an in parenthesis in there, this will work. If we take this for a little spin, so you'll see this customer CSV file. I'm going to open it in Notepad. And that's all it is. It's just a bunch of copper separated data. That's all it is. We'll close that down. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on this side, but what we have to do first, we're going to have to get rid of this file folder CSV. So we're just going to exclude that from the project. Probably going to have to add a dependency in here for the export. And then the last thing, that should take care of these guys with the using. And the last thing is we should just be able to pick this up, copy it, and drop it. And run it. It's the one on the left and the one on the right, and we both have files in them. They're just a couple minutes apart. And this does have the exact same data. It's running the same code in the export, so I know they're matching. So now we're over here with Worker. and we want to be able to bring anything in. Well, we can. We can just change this to file storage and change this to file storage, change this to file storage. This still has to be file storage CSV, and we can literally do the same thing over on this side like that. And now it depends on what type you send in here. So if you're going to send in a JSON, and on this one here, we could send in an XML, that. And we could execute both of these at the same time. This one produced the XML. This one over here produced the JSON. So we both getting data out. Okay, everything's looking really good. This is just zoomed in real far. This one's not. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to take the one on the right. We're going to open it up a little bit. And as I was saying before, the export on these is, the code is all the same. They're different DLLs, but the code is all the same. And we're using the file storage, get rid of that, file storage with an abstract class in it. So the abstract guarantees that its children, the file, anything that inherits from this, the CSV, the JSON, the XML, they all have got to override export. Now, CSV has load in it. None of the other ones do not, because we do not need it there. So that is something that we will have problems with later if we try to share this with somebody that is external. What are the chances of someone asking externally from another department or anything to get into here? Is pretty slim. But there might be another project or something that is in our department that may need this. And what I would do to make this change is I would throw an interface on this. Now, an interface, you're going to want to stay away from anything customizable. Or, sorry, you're going to want to stay away from any data types that are custom. So typically, we'll throw in a JSON, which can go right into a string. The export method is going to have to get data somehow, shape, or form. Otherwise, it won't be able to export it. I mean, that's just common sense. File storage is going to be the area just to hold the config data directory and get that loaded up. That's just a common courtesy. Now, each file storage CSV, JSON, and XML will also, and I'm air quoting, inherit from my file storage, because that will require them to have an export that will take in a JSON string, and then we will deserialize that using the JSON deserializer in the serialization project. If anybody did from another department come in and say, hey, we want to call your export, maybe we make it maybe it ends up being a service, a web service that we're just going to do exportations from, and they want to be able to send in whatever they want. This is great, no problem, and we can do that. We'll load everything up, or we will call the load before the export happens, because we just don't want to keep all of our data in memory. Maybe it'll be in a database by then. Who knows? But that's the whole, that's what your brain has got to think about going through this. So now we have a contract with iFileStorage inside of our iFile JSON, and that contract is not with just the children like what we had in the number one, what we had previously with the abstract. It was with just the children. Now this is with the worker. Okay, so now you've got this contract here that says we will have an export, and you can send in a serialized JSON of our customers, and we'll process it. And that's all that we need. Is this a realistic thing? Maybe, I don't know. But it is kind of gives you the idea of how far off the beaten trail you can go with dependency injection. There's no limit to it. You could, like I said, you could take this and put this in its own web service, and now it's its own entity at all, and it's totally remote from everything. But the main task of this was to get it outside of worker, and we did. These are now totally 100% decoupled. We can, except for this, we're loading it, but you send in a file storage and we'll export it. And that's pretty much it. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you ring that bell so you don't miss the next video on serialization. I'm going to cover just about everything that there is on serialization in general for serializing JSON. I don't think if you want me to do a video on serializing XML and using XSLT and all that other stuff, let me know, drop it in the comments or send me an email and I'll put something together for you. But hardly anybody uses SOAP anymore. There's so many businesses out there that are converting from SOAP to REST. It's just unhinged how much is doing it because it's so much more powerful. You're always welcome here at the C# Workshop. If you have any ideas for videos, please drop them down. I'll add them to the list. And as always, have a nice day.